Hello, my name is Wendy Hale from In the Pink Therapies and Training, which is a therapy training centre based in Risca near Newport and South Wales. I'm here today to talk to you about anatomy and physiology, or as we in the trade like to call it, A and P. This is part of the Federation of Holistic Therapists Stay at Home series, and in following this video and completing the worksheet, then you will be able to obtain CPD points. So, let's move on. I love A and P, don't you? I love the way that we can look at individual body systems in turn. For example, we could learn about the muscular system and how there are 640 plus muscles. We can look at the endocrine system and all the different hormones that are produced and what they do. We could look at how urine is made in the urinary system, or the skeletal system with its 206 bones. But what I thought I would do in this video, rather than focusing on individual body systems, I thought perhaps we'd take just a few and see how they correlate, how they interact with each other, what their relationships are with each other. So, without further ado, let's move on. Let's start by looking at the muscular system. Any thoughts on what other body systems might interact with the muscular system? Well, for starters, we've got the blood circulatory system. What's the connection here? Well, think about the blood vessels. They comprise smooth muscle tissue. And if you remember from your studies, we have three different types of muscle tissue. We have striated muscle or skeletal muscle, this one, sometimes called voluntary muscle tissue. This acts under conscious control. We have then cardiac muscle tissue, which is only found in the heart. This allows the continual rhythmic beating of the heart, and this is unconscious control. And then we have smooth muscle tissue, again, unconscious control. Smooth muscle tissue, sometimes called involuntary muscle tissue. And this is found, as we've said, lining the walls of blood vessels, but also in hollow internal organs, such as the bladder, the uterus, the large intestine. Now, smooth muscle tissue is able to contract and relax for a long period of time without tiring. Just what we need in the blood circulatory system. Another body system which has a connection with the muscular system is the digestive system. And this is for reasons that we've already mentioned. The structures of the digestive system comprise smooth muscle tissue, such as in the esophagus, the stomach, the small and large intestine, for example. And this smooth muscle tissue is comprised in layers. So as one layer is contracting, the other layer is relaxing, and so on. And this has the effect of forcing the food down through the system. And the word that we use for this is peristalsis. Then we have the skeletal system. Without muscles attaching to our bones, we would simply be a pile of bones on the floor. We need muscles to hold us upright, to maintain posture, and to produce heat. Now, muscles attach to our bones, to our skeleton, by way of tendons. And where these tendons join over a joint, then we have movement, such as this. The tendon moves from the point of origin, where it starts, over to the point of insertion, and then during movement, conscious control, the point of insertion draws closer to the point of origin. Think also of the urinary system having a correlation with the muscular system. Again, smooth muscle tissue. We have smooth muscle tissue in the two ureters, which are leaving the kidneys. We've got peristalsis going on, as well as the force of gravity to move the urine down into the bladder. The bladder, again, smooth muscle tissue, which is allowing it to contract, some degree of flexibility there, contracting and relaxing. And then when we get the urge to urinate, the urine leaves the body through the urethra, again, smooth muscle tissue. Let's take a look now at the respiratory system. This too has a connection with the blood circulatory system. How? Well, we know that the respiratory system is about taking in air, about taking in oxygen. And this oxygen travels around the body in the blood, attached to the red blood cells. Also travelling around the body is deoxygenated blood. And this moves through the body towards the heart. Once in the heart pumps and sends the deoxygenated blood to the lungs, where it gets some oxygen, and then the oxygenated blood travels back to the heart, where it is pumped out to the rest of the body. We also have a waste product, carbon dioxide, and that is excreted from the lungs as we breathe out. We've already seen how the muscular system plays a role in the blood circulatory system, the digestive system and the urinary system, but it also has a role to play in the respiratory system. Muscles are involved in the process of respiration. We have the intercostal muscles between the ribs and the diaphragm just below them. Firstly, let's look at the intercostal muscles. We have two sets of these, internal and external intercostals, both working together to raise and lower the rib cage during respiration. As one set contracts, one set relaxes, and vice versa. When the external intercostal muscles contract, the internal intercostal muscles relax, and this forces the rib cage to move up and outward. When this happens, there's more space in the thoracic cavity, and therefore there's more space for the lungs. And in order to fill this space, and in order to maintain pressure with the internal environment within the lungs and the external environment outside the body, we are then forced to breathe in, to take in air, to fill the space in the lungs. As we are forced to breathe in, what happens with the diaphragm is it contracts, so forcing it downwards like that. Again, so we've got the chest cavity opening up, we've got the diaphragm moving down, creating lots of space in the thoracic cavity. It also happens in reverse, in that when the internal intercostal muscles contract, the external intercostal muscles relax, and the diaphragm relaxes and forms a sort of dome shape at the bottom of the thoracic cavity there. This then creates less space. The rib cage is lowered, there's less room in there because the diaphragm has moved up, there's less space in the thoracic cavity, and this has the effect of forcing us to breathe out in order to maintain the balance between what is in here and what is out here. And all this happens automatically. We don't even have to think about it. There are times when we do want to control our breathing, and we can do that, such as when we're swimming underwater, or when we want to sing, we can control our breathing then as well. But there are also times when the nervous system comes into play, such as when we're watching a programme on telly and we sit on the edge of our seat and you suddenly realise then that you're holding your breath in anticipation. Or we might even gasp if something shocking happens on the television. So the nervous system is coming into play there. Let us move on now to the urinary system. We've already mentioned its relationship with the muscular system due to the smooth muscle tissue. So let's take a look now at the blood circulatory system. We already know the blood vessels are formed with smooth muscle tissue, but there's another way in which the urinary system is connected with the blood circulatory system. And that is because the urinary system filters blood, which enters the kidneys at the renal artery. The filtering takes place in the nephrons within the kidneys, and these nephrons can remove or reabsorb water. as well as any salts or calciums. Excess waste products are then excreted as part of the urine. And with this constant monitoring of blood in the kidneys, there is a constant or a relationship with blood volume and hence blood pressure. For example, if there is too little water within the blood as it enters the kidneys, a hormone called antidiuretic hormone is produced by the endocrine system, and this has the effect of telling the nephrons to reabsorb water, not to excrete the water as part of urine, to hang on to it for the body because there's not enough in the body, there's not enough in the blood. So again, balancing out blood pressure. When there are normal levels of water in the body and in the blood, then the production of antidiuretic hormone stops and the nephrons are able to produce or take up the water and excrete that excess water as part of the urine. And what about the endocrine system? How is this related to the urinary system? Well, the hypothalamus in the brain, part of the endocrine system, talks to the pituitary gland. If you remember from your studies, the pituitary gland is known as the master gland because it has so much control over different organs and glands within the body. It talks about how much water there is in the bloodstream. So, for example, if there is not enough water in the bloodstream, then the endocrine system will produce a hormone called antidiuretic hormone. This has the effect of getting the nephrons in the urinary system to reabsorb some of the water. So rather than simply excreting it as part of the urine, it reabsorbs it into the body, keeping it within the body. And then when normal levels of water in the blood apply, then antidiuretic hormone is stopped and the nephrons are able to produce urine and release water as part of that urine. You wouldn't think the urinary system had anything at all to do with the skeletal system, would you? But it does. We need a certain level of calcium in the body, in the blood. It helps to build bone tissue, and it's needed to generate muscle contractions, especially important to enable the heart to continue beating. If we think of the calcium as it circulates in the bloodstream, if there's too little in the blood, then the endocrine system instructs the parathyroid glands to produce parathyroid hormone. Yes, I know this is the endocrine system, but as a result of this, the distal convoluted tubule in the nephrons of the kidneys reabsorbs calcium rather than excretes it in the urine. It reabsorbs it back into the body and it makes its way back into the blood circulatory system. And similarly, if there is more than enough calcium in the blood, then the endocrine system instructs the thyroid gland to produce calcitonin, which has the effect of putting calcium on the bones, but it also forces the kidneys to excrete calcium. So the nephrons will remove the calcium and it will be removed in the urine. Let's now have a look at the relationships between the digestive system and other body systems. To start with, we have the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system has tiny vessels called lacteals in the small intestine, and they help to absorb fats from the small intestine. These fats are then transported around the body in the lymphatic capillaries, lymphatic vessels, and eventually make their way back to the blood circulatory system. We have the blood circulatory system being connected to the digestive system as well, as it's a transport system. It transports the fats that we've already said and nutrients throughout the body to each and every cell. Then there's the endocrine system. The hormones of the endocrine system stimulate the release of digestive enzymes, and these help to chemically break down the food particles in the body. Then the digestive system is connected with the muscular system as well. We have the tongue in the mouth, which is a muscle, and that helps to churn and break down food and helps to swallow the food as well. And as we've already mentioned previously, the digestive system, its structures and organs comprise smooth muscle tissue, which allow the process of peristalsis, moving the food throughout the system. And finally, can you remember the part of the nervous system which controls internal bodily activity without any conscious thought? It's the autonomic nervous system. If you remember from your studies, the nervous system is quite complex. I'll explain briefly here now. So take a look at this diagram. As you'll see at the top, there's the central nervous system, and this comprises the brain and the spinal cord. Alongside that, then, you've got the peripheral nervous system, which is basically anything else, those nerves which extend from the spinal cord and serve the rest of the body. The peripheral nervous system can be split into two divisions. We've got the sensory division, which is, as our name suggests, works with our senses: smell, taste, touch, sight, and hearing. And then we've got the motor division. This is further divided into two parts. We've got the somatic nervous system. The somatic is about conscious control over muscles. So, for example, when we're doing this, we use the somatic nervous system. And when we're walking, we're using the somatic nervous system to move our legs. And then we have the autonomic nervous system. This is the system that controls things automatically. So if you think about automatic, autonomic, so this is the system that's involved with the process of digestion, the autonomic nervous system. And within that, it's further divided again into the sympathetic nervous system, or division, and the parasympathetic nervous system, or division. The sympathetic nervous system is that which controls actions related to the fight or flight response. The body comes out in sympathy with us, the sympathetic nervous system, and it controls different activities within the body then. So, for example, if we're trying to run away from that bear, trying to deal with some sort of stressor, then adrenaline is produced and it causes lots of changes in the body, such as the pupils in the eyes dilate so that we've got better perception, better vision. Glucose is released into the bloodstream so that we've got more energy to run or to fight. Energy is taken away from parts of the body where it's not quite so important when we're in that fight or flight mode. So digestion, for example, it's not important that we digest, it's more important that we fight. And blood vessels as well, it can cause them to dilate in areas where we need more blood, more energy, so the muscles, the heart, and they will constrict in areas where which are less important when we are in that fight or flight mode. So again, digestive system and such like. For our last body system, let's take a look at the lymphatic system. Unlike the blood circulatory system, which has a pump to pump the blood around the body, the lymphatic system doesn't have anything like that. It has to rely on the movement of muscles. As they contract and relax, that forces the lymph slowly to move through the lymphatic vessels, squeezing it through at a very slow rate. The lymphatic system is also closely connected with the blood circulatory system. Let me explain. If you look at the image here, you'll see from the blood vessel at the top that has the water content within it, which is then called plasma, that leaks out to surround a cell. And through that, we have the enablement of transportation of nutrients into the cell and waste products out of the cell. As this fluid has now leaked out of the blood vessels, it changes its name. It used to be called plasma when it was within the blood capillary. Now it is called extracellular fluid or interstitial fluid or body tissue fluid, depending which book you look at. Now, that fluid, that extracellular fluid, needs to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. Otherwise, we could end up with edema, and the blood pressure will lower because the fluid will be around the cells instead of in the blood circulatory system where it needs to be. And approximately 3 litres of fluid every day is reabsorbed back into the lymphatic system, back into the blood circulatory system. 3 litres. You can just imagine how much that is. Now, as the fluid is building up around the cells, the force of that pressure against the lymph capillary, which you see down the bottom of the diagram, is so great that it forces the little flaps to open and the lymph fluid enters the lymph capillary. Now all these lymph capillaries join together into bigger lymphatic vessels, and they make their way then to one of 2 ducts. We have 2 ducts, left and right lymphatic ducts. These then transfer the lymph back into the blood circulatory system via the left and the right subclavian veins. Subclavian, if you think sub, below, clavian, clavicle, so just below the clavicle there. The lymph then re-enters the blood circulatory system and everything returns to normal. The lymphatic system also has a close connection with the digestive system. It does this by way of tiny hair-like structures called villi in the small intestine. And these villi have specialized lymph capillaries within them called lacteals. And these lacteals absorb fats and fat-soluble vitamins within the small intestine and return them to the blood. Also within the small intestine, we have tiny structures of lymphatic tissue called Peyer's patches. And these Peyer's patches contain macrophages. And for those of you that are as old as I am, you'll remember Pac-Man from years ago, and I always think of the Pac-Man coming along, gobbling up and destroying any amounts of bacteria in there to stop them from penetrating the intestinal wall. Well, that's been a quick tour around the body systems, or some of the body systems, and how they relate to each other. It's fascinating, isn't it? How the body carries out most actions without any conscious effort on our part at all. I, for one, am glad that I don't have to think about all the processes my body does to keep me functioning. I don't think I could mentally cope with having to remember to breathe, or to digest my food, or to contract and relax my muscles for movement. What an incredible design! We couldn't replicate this if we tried. Well, that's it from me. I hope I've given you some insight into the relationships between our amazing body systems. All that remains now is for me to say thank you for watching. Diolch yn fawr iawn.